Please go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Mitch, for recording. Yeah, but on the issue of meeting times, I've got we've got a couple of people on our team at Microsoft who are in the EU, so it'd be nice for them to be able to attend at a more friendly time as well. One thing that comes to my mind is that for a while, for a couple of years at least, the Istio project had two different working group meetings, one for ambient and one for regular. It seems reasonable to me to sort of create another standing time slot. And within TOC, we can make sure that there is a find people to attend. There's enough representation for quorum for decisions, and see if we can't make that work. I do think that the bigger issue is just going to be figuring out what time slots. Maybe there's a US one, and then the second time slot alternates between EU and APAC. There are a couple of different ways we could structure it. But I appreciate you bringing this up, Len. We definitely need to address this.
Yeah, just a quick pull here. If we move an hour earlier, would that be helpful for the EU team? I'm not sure if I want to focus on Asian Pacific right now because I haven't heard people specifically from Asian Pacific asking for a better time. And in the past, we did adjust one of the time for the Asian Pacific, and it ended up they didn't show up, and it was a bad time for the US. It just didn't work at all. Okay, we have some feedback from Daniel. It's working better if we move a little bit earlier, but I can send a poll to. Do you think a contributor channel would be a better one for this poll? Or which channel should we ask?
I think contributor makes sense.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, let's move on to the rest of the agenda. Go ahead. Thanks for sharing.
Mitch, if you're talking, you're muted.
Nope.
Oh, okay. I guess we're going on the agenda then. Who's got the first issue?
I'm not sure who added this issue.
I guess this is a follow-up from last week where we discussed this idea. And maybe it's just for awareness that the issue was opened.
Yeah, that sounds right. Thank you. It's harder to connect his GitHub ID with the real person on the call. That's why it took me a while to make that connection.
Well, he works with Andrew. Andrew was the one who recommended it last week.
That's why. I was like, there's no way he looks like Andrew on the name or on the picture. Okay, thanks.
All right. Is William with us for the next one?
Yeah. So I think I was proposing like being able to patch like these upstream HTTP filters in the cluster, primarily like for our use case, we'd want it to like inject the admission control, admission control filter for like client side's throttling. And right now to do so, you would have to like override the entire cluster through a cluster merge patch due to some merge semantics. And I was proposing a kind of like a quality of life change to be able to do that, similar to how you would do it with the current like HTTP filter patch by patching the array of filters that's in the cluster. I was wondering if there was any thoughts on this feature request.
I think at first glance, this seems reasonable to me. For just my understanding, what sorts of cluster HTTP filters are you? Oh, here's an example right here. Okay.
The example is bad because like there's almost no reason why you would need to patch a header mutation in the cluster rather than the HTTP connection manager. I think
Yeah.
primarily I would think a good example would be the admission control filter, which like for like disaster scenarios, that's like where like outlier detection or like panic threshold
Yeah.
wouldn't kick in. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, yeah, seems reasonable to me. I am not a on-way filter expert, but the use case seems valid, and adding a new context with which to apply the change seems like it would work. The question that comes to my mind is, how does this work with the current apply tos? So, like, if you have one on-way filter that's appending a HTTP, like a HTTP filter, and another one that's replacing the entire cluster, what takes precedence?
Yeah, so at least in my prototype, I have it have the cluster patches apply first, and then the HTTP filters apply second. So, and there is like this weird scenario where like if you define a HTTP patch, but the cluster is like configured for like a TCP protocol, it kind of like fails silently. Like the patch just doesn't apply because there's no HTTP settings to apply it to. So there are like, let's say, some corner cases that come with introduce this for sure.
Yeah, I guess that would be my only concern with this would be from an API stability or not stability, but API compatibility perspective. We want all my filters already fairly complicated. We want the rules to, like, for conflicts emerging to be like as intuitive as we can. I would say next steps for me that would help me make a decision on this would be to maybe a 1 or 2 page doc just covering those corner cases and laying out what the implications are. I know that would help me at least.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Quick question. Is it correct to assume you have a way to do this with Envoy filter today, but it requires way more configuration because you have to rewrite the entire cluster? But with this way, I guess the configuration is a little bit simpler, but it comes with some caveats that Keith was just raising. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, that's true. So you can just patch the entire cluster using the cluster envoy filter. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess the advantage of patching the entire thing is that it's more deterministic, right? So you know exactly how you want to patch with what sequence within that cluster. And then using this config patch, the ordering could be potentially a little bit more uncertainty.
Yeah, I think the trade-offs come with where like if when you choose the use the cluster override patch, you end up having to redo all the logic that you would have gotten through like destination rule. But I do agree that there are pros and cons. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Does anyone else have any question for William?
All right. So the next document up is mostly just an FYI. We released ambient multi-cluster to alpha in 127, and I now have a draft burn down list for what needs to be done for beta. We are hoping to hit beta in the 128 release, so that is an aggressive timeline. I've taken the requirements for beta from our community site and sort of mapped them onto what we're doing in beta. We've got current work on performance and scale that we're going to be able to add documentation for on the website. Actually, a lot of other things are already complete or unnecessary, like there's no CLI commands that are specific to ambient multi-cluster. So for this week, really, what we want to do is just make sure that everyone's aware that this is out there. Please take a look over the coming week. Next week, I'd like to try and finalize the list and make sure that we have agreement on what work is necessary to get to beta. But I don't need to spend more of your time on it this week. Jackie?
Yeah. Hey, could you just go ahead and click that link for that doc? Okay, awesome. So this is still work in progress, but I just wanted to share it out to get some initial feedback and just explore the idea with folks. So this is kind of all related to an issue that's been created by some folks with working with SQL Server, Azure SQL Server, and their reliance on making, or in their attempt to use ambient mesh, and their reliance on their applications making requests to multiple IPs, and then expecting, only maybe one of those requests to succeed, and then continuing with that successful connection. And right now, with our current design for zTunnel, we optimistically complete our TCP handshakes, and then once zTunnel is received the necessary configuration, it then attempts the upstream TCP connections. So this is a problem for the SQL Server's implementation, because whatever TCP request or TCP request that the zTunnel receives first, it'll accept. And then from the client's perspective, that was a successful connection, and then it drops all other IPs that it's attempting to connect to, even though the actual upstream connection that then zTunnel attempts might fail. So this results in primarily failed requests for the SQL Server and just lack of support for that functionality. So this is kind of, I'm going through ideas for how we could fix this with service entries and just support kind of more complex resolution strategies in general. I would love feedback on specifically, because I'm not as familiar with what's possible for zTunnel in terms of these like optimistic accepts. I'm not sure if it's possible to disable that or bypass it. I'm not sure if you can delay accept. I'm not sure if you can look at a request and decide whether you want to accept it before accepting. Because that is one approach, is we could allow users to disable this optimistic behavior if we didn't want to bloat service entries by allowing more configuration. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Costin.
I think you are treating it as a feature. I think we should treat it as a bug, really, because it's technically ambient is supposed to be ambient. It's supposed to not change the semantics of TCP. So, else is the connection, which is the connection will fail if both is not accepting. So, obviously, it's to require some stuff, but I don't think it's I don't think it's the correct behavior what we are doing. And if you look at SOX, for example, it's kind of the same thing. It reports back the remote IP and port and success and failure of the connection, and pretty much everyone is doing this So anyway, that's my point, in my opinion.
Okay, I missed, you're breaking up, so I missed a lot of the middle part, but I guess the general sentiment is, look, we really don't have control over this, so, or really control over zTunnel accepting that handshake. Is that what you're saying, Costin?
No, I'm saying that correct behavior is to not accept the connection.
Okay.
I mean, reject the connection if it doesn't work. I mean, return an error soon, fast. I mean, fast fail.
So you're saying zTunnel's current behavior is incorrect then?
Yeah, it should fail. Basically, so the request should fail. I mean, if you try to connect and we cannot, I mean, we need to accept the connection initially because we need to get the information from, remote IP port and everything else. But we can terminate the connection if it doesn't work. That's.
I mean, the reason we have the optimistic is to reduce latency for, so users can receive the accept and continue with the connection while zTunnel finishes or, gets the necessary configuration. So I guess if we disabled this, then wouldn't that reintroduce that latency? Go ahead, Ian.
I'm not sure that's exactly the reason why it does that.
Okay.
We consume some pretty low-level crates in zTunnel, but they're not like super low level. And so I don't know that there's an option for like peeking at it without accepting.
Sure.
Which doesn't mean it's maybe not possible at all, but like we would probably end up writing a big chunk of the TCP stack ourselves.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
I wanted to dig a little bit deeper to understand what Costin was suggesting. The way I understood, Costin, what you were saying is when we accept the connection, once we figure out that the connection, upstream connection doesn't work, we should break it, connection with the downstream. Is that what you were suggesting? Not that we don't accept TCP connection.
So if you look at the SOX specification, which is a standard protocol, and I think MySQL and pretty much everyone is supporting it, the connection is accepted by SOX server. SOX servers attempt a connection, and if it fails, it returns an error. If it succeeds, it returns the remote IP and the tuple that is necessary by the client, so client knows where the connection actually went. I think we had support in zTunnel for SOX. So even today, theoretically, if the client, if MySQL or whatever, it's using SOX, it should probably work as expected because any SOX client is supposed to handle this exact case by looking at not at the connection error, but what SOX headers return. With AJ proxy, probably it's possible as well. I don't remember exactly the details, but I'm pretty sure with SOX it's built in, and I don't think we removed the SOX support in zTunnel.
And returning to Jackie, in this particular case, the client uses plain TCP, right?
I need to look back. My guess is no, but Keith, do you remember?
Yeah, I think it is just plain TCP. They're not like database protocols are weird. There's a bunch of different variations. In some of them, they don't even wrap the entire thing in TLS. From my understanding and looking back through the issue, the database client is just sending two TCP handshakes to begin with to the two IP addresses returned by DNS to see which one succeeds. I don't think that there's like a SOX proxy on top of that for that particular mode. And I think Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had another person in Slack who wanted like a variation on this request on this connection pattern, right? I think it would be a similar issue there.
Yeah, I think I've talked to some people who are doing similar sorts of things. Yeah, it's definitely tricky.
I mean, other than disabling, okay, so like ignoring like the idea that we could like somehow not accept or decide conditionally to accept or not. I guess this proposal was like we allow, our favorite labels on a service entry to, tell zTunnel or a waypoint how we want it to handle multiple DNS entries that are returned and how we want it to then handle creating upstream connections or upstream handshakes. And so from the client's perspective, they would only receive a VIP, an Istio like allocated VIP. And then, so then the VIP connection would succeed, the handshake would look like, and you would return the VIP to the client. And then zTunnel would actually then handle, based on whatever strategy you had specified, zTunnel would then handle initiating TCP connections to all the different IPs that were returned in another DNS resolution.
That sounds right to me. So just to make sure I'm understanding the proposal, we use labels to change the behavior.
Mhm.
And what one of these options would be is one of these options would be is that zTunnel intercepted DNS requests returns just one IP address instead of the two that the client is used to, or the multiple that clients are used to.
Yeah.
Because there's just one TCP connection.
Yes,
And
correct.
then zTunnel or Envoy for the upstream connection would handle sort of the racing or the multiple DNS records and deal with that, sort of put that to the side for a second. But basically that will put that complexity within zTunnel to have different ways to resolve where their request should go if there are multiple upstream DNS entries. Is that
Yes, and
accurate?
I did not explain that well at first, but I think the problem I'm really trying to solve is not that we accepted like a TCP handshake and then it eventually the connection fails because there's no, no upstream successes. I'm not really trying to solve that problem. I'm trying to solve, I don't want us to accept, or zTunnel to accept a connection and then pick for a specific backing IP that will not succeed. So I don't want to close the door, essentially, on trying multiple IPs, rather and returning a VIP by early accepting a specific connection for a specific backing IP, which I think is what ultimately kind of happens with our current behavior, specifically without a service entry.
Right. Like if both IPs are down, then we should fail and return like the TCP reset to the client. But the issue right now is that one is successful, but we send a reset to the client anyway. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. In that case, yeah, I think the idea of using a service entry and having auto-assign VIP makes sense.
And just for some more context, this current user isn't creating a service entry right now, and they don't have any service entry applied. I believe if they created a service entry with a DNS resolution and no endpoint specified, I think they would just get the round robin retries, and they would get, at least my understanding is they would get an Istio deallocated VIP for their initial DNS request returned that zTunnel would proxy. That's my understanding, but there wouldn't be any more fine-grained control over the actual strategy other than just round robin. Sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Does Envoy implement these sort of like database strategies? Can you set a cluster to be like, use Microsoft SQL Server semantics for resolving multiple DNS connections? Like, is that a solution? We just have to get the traffic to an egress waypoint?
I mean, I guess that's assuming that we could make users want or have to use an egress waypoint. You know, if like we're then requiring that for this workflow. So that's like one component. Another would be, I believe, there's some strategy. Keith, I think we had discussed this, that Envoy has some support already to handle this for strict DNS. It's not, I don't know if it's specific to databases.
Yeah, it's not specific. So what Envoy does is with strict DNS mode, like Jackie was saying, is every single record returned from DNS, as it resolves asynchronously, each DNS record becomes a host within a cluster, or within an Envoy cluster. And so that is how Envoy chooses. And so at that point, you can do health checking on the cluster. And so if there's a cluster that doesn't have, like, has failures, then it gets ejected from the cluster. And I think that's how they sort of solve this generally. To that question, though, I'm not sure why this doesn't happen with sidecars. We've got lots of people internally who use Istio for like Istio sidecar mode, and this is not an issue. So I'm not quite certain in the details yet of why this doesn't happen, but I think strict DNS might be at least a contributing factor to how this works.
Do they just opt out the port?
That was the original ask.
Yeah.
But there was John and Louis had some concerns with allowing port opt-outs, because right now that's not a thing in Istio. And I think, Jack, in your doc, you've got that in alternatives considered.
Yeah, I have a one line about it and saying it's not ideal, not secure. Yeah, John and Louis expressed their concerns.
That would be my guess about how the sidecars are doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a great call out.
I'm not sure if that's why the sidecar not getting this issue though. Because I've never heard people saying they have to make this change for sidecar in the service entry resource to improve how the resolution works. I'm worried about we adding something we're not needing, or only for one data plane. So I think it's worthwhile to dig into why it's not needed in the sidecar.
Yeah, I would be really concerned about, like, if we adopt one special database thing,
Sure.
It's a semantic for one thing, and then someone comes along and says, "Oh, mine uses a slightly different thing. Can you implement that?" So that zTunnel is like trying to be a generic SQL client in how it handles TCP, which is gonna, I don't know, it seems like it could snowball.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's where, as I was writing this, I mean, that was why I liked the idea of somehow disabling the optimistic, but I get that that's more complicated. But yeah, no, it seems like we're encoding application or user specific logic into zTunnel to unblock them. And I'd rather unblock them in a different way without encoding that specific logic.
Yeah, and Jackie, I look at the end of your doc, you actually said that if they have special needs on DNS resolution, they should be using sidecar. Does that imply this issue definitely not existed in the sidecar world?
No, I mean, that was under the assumption that, this is under the assumption that it's not an issue. I can verify that further, but that was just an alternative considered as if we should require, like, hey, you got to use the sidecar in ambient mode as, like, assuming interop is supported. Hey, you have to use the sidecar for now.
Yeah.
Yeah, with some people that I've talked to about similar things, it always starts out as like, hey, how do you opt out a port from zTunnel capture? So my guess is that's what's going on, and why sidecar would be a quote unquote fix is we just have that capability to ignore a port.
I mean, I feel like that protects the I don't know, zTunnel's lightness. And and also data, like you said, Lynn, data plane specific configuration. So I'll reach back out to the user who filed this issue for the SQL server and see what configuration they have today for Sidecar that's making this work. But yeah, thanks all for taking a look. Appreciate the feedback on everything. Yeah, just wanted to throw out all the alternatives and see kind of what people were, what was feeling right. So this is a good check. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. I think with costing, if we don't have to expose the configuration to the user, that would be the ideal scenario.
Yep.
Yep.
It was just if there were a large enough number of users where this like same scenario would be also helpful. Great, but I think I'm not sure that's the case, and if it could be accomplished in a different way, yeah, I think that would be ideal.
Yeah. All right, I think
All
that's
right.
the end of the agenda. Sorry, Michi.
No, you've got it.
Should we wrap this up, or is there anything else we should be discussing? All right. Thanks everyone for joining. See you all next week. Actually, I'm traveling next week, but I'm sure and I will send a poll for the meeting time, but I expect that would not happen till September. So thanks all.
Thanks. Cheers.
Cool. Thank you.
folks.